North Americans are not the only Americans in the world. We are not the only Americans in the world who love our freedom. Washington, D.C. has absolutely no clue about the Pandora's box it's getting ready to open. Argentina, and this woman that you're seeing in front of you, was upset last year because Argentina failed to pass a bill allowing abortion of any kind in Argentina. Argentina is one of the most pro-US countries in South America. And being as close to the United States as possible, they still find the practice and the concept of abortion to be aberrant and disgusting. That's how different this culture is. The U.S. has no clue, and by the U.S. I mean Washington, D.C., and those in control of our military have absolutely no idea what they're getting into. If that's how they think in Argentina, how do you think they believe in a place like Venezuela, which is about as far away from the United States as you can get? Oddly enough, as a side note, there is a country named Bolivia. Not many people know much about Bolivia, but it's actually farther down the Bolivarian Revolution road than Venezuela is. In fact, they have castigated Venezuela for allowing any U.S. influence in their country at all and warned them that it would be their undoing. They are far, far more into social democracy than Venezuela is, and they are actually doing quite well. It's a different story for a different day, but in today's video, what I'm going to do is walk you through the 10 steps, the 10 events that occurred since 1999 that led to the issue in Venezuela. A lot of people have asked, well, things are so great, with their government, how are things so bad? I've tried to outline this in a way that people can understand in a very succinct way. I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this with links backing up my statements into the comment section or perhaps the description so that you can go to these links, read it for yourself, see what happened, and you don't have to take my word for it. All right, we're going to set the stage. Step 1. In 1999, when Chavez took power, the next 14 years saw the greatest increase in the standard of living of any nation in the world over the same relative time period, at any point in history. However, this came at a cost to the super wealthy elitists in Venezuela and big U.S. oil companies that had been taking advantage of the loophole in the law that prohibited U.S. big oil from pumping oil for profit. See, they couldn't pump U.S. oil and sell it on the open market. The U.S. banned them from doing that because of the crisis back in 73, 74, 75. But it didn't prohibit them from going to other countries and pulling their oil out and selling it on the market for profit. Well, when they decided to do this, all these big oil companies, they picked winners and losers, basically, and the vast majority of Venezuela was suffering. That's why Chavez won 60% of the vote in 99. And even right before he died, when he ran in 2012, when he ran against Radonsky, he had virtually the exact same numbers. He clobbered Radonsky. It was like 55 to 44, and his election in 99 was 56 to 40. So in that intervening time, you would have to ask yourself a question. If he was so bad, he was so terrible, how did he maintain the exact same group of people voting for him? But after an illegal criminal coup in 2002 failed to unseat him, Big Oil and their allies in the U.S. government reacted with the following steps. See, Chavez took advantage of a provision in their constitution that says no foreign entity can come in and take advantage of the people and do things to deprive them of the wealth that's entitled to them in the Constitution from their mineral wealth, from anything, whether it's oil or gold or anything else, that's in their Constitution. The U.S. likes to paint it that Chavez stole all of this, that, and the other. Nothing could be further from the truth. He didn't steal anything. He used constitutional law and provision to hold big oil accountable for the illegal, dirty dealings they had been getting away with during the 90s under U.S. rule. Step 2, 2014, meeting in Vienna. The U.S. and its allies, OPEC meeting. In OPEC, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and the UAE flooded the markets with excess oil, violating every single historical precedent. World economies were slowing, which historically meant cutting production to stabilize the price. See, usually big oil liked it when the price of oil went up. It had kind of a negative effect in our country because it slowed our economy. And given that by law, we were the only customer they were allowed to sell to, which is kind of odd given the allegations of us not being a socialist country, another argument. They did the exact opposite. They absolutely destroyed the price of oil, almost 80% overnight, while we had record amounts of oil in our strategic reserve, the highest amounts we had ever had in 80 years. And once again, I can back that up with links, and you'll see it down in the description or down in the comment section. It bankrupted almost a dozen countries. Venezuela wasn't the only one that was suffering, but Venezuela was the only one that was sanctioned and prevented from going to the IMF, prevented from going to big U.S. banks, who were perfectly willing to extend loans to Venezuela. They were prevented by our government from doing so. This is what happens with oil countries, countries that make most of their money from oil. There is, of course, up and down. This was not a normal up and down. They take out loans all the time to make up shortfalls, and then when things are good, they pay it back. That's normal business. Well, the U.S. interjected itself in the free market, so much for not being a socialist country, once again, and decided it was going to turn the screws on Venezuela. And I'm going to, like I said, here's a bunch of links to show this. Step 3, in 2015, we lifted our ban on selling oil overseas because of the massive amount of oil coming out of the Bakken, the Canadian tar sands, Texas, all of this. And we continued to glut the market with oil, driving the price down. While simultaneously, we issued an executive order declaring Venezuela a threat to national security. And yes, for those of you that are asking the question, this was 2015. This issue with Venezuela goes back decades and through many, many different administrations. That's what our president was talking about a couple weeks ago when he said we are too far down the road for him to have a conversation with Nicolas Maduro about this. Step 4. While nearly every oil-producing nation in the world was turning to the IMF and international banks for loans to cover the shortfall in oil revenues, the U.S. issued more executive orders banning U.S. banks and financial institutions from having any financial dealings with Venezuela, cutting off their access to critical refinancing options. And I will, once again, there's a link that'll be at the very bottom that'll show the U.S. sanctions that started in 2014 and continue to this day. Step 5. 2016, the U.S. seized nearly $2 billion in Venezuelan bank accounts in the U.S. They also, and this is so important, they prevented Venezuelan-owned Citgo and Valero from sending payments and dividends from sales inside the U.S. and added new sanctions preventing any U.S. businesses from selling food, medicine, or industrial supplies to the Venezuelan government. The ensuing shortages began driving up the cost of goods, and the bolivar, their currency, started to spiral. Now think about that for a minute. You go down to your Citgo, you go down to your Valero, you get a tank of gas, you go in and you buy some goodies or whatever, and all that money you would think would go to the person who owned it, right? No, the U.S. seized it. And still to this day holds that money as if it's their own. Now, simultaneously, Colombia, our ally, seeing the problem, allowed paramilitaries to flood into Venezuela, where they used U.S. dollars, now worth much, much more relative to the bolivar, to buy up the remaining goods that were on the shelves. They took them back into Colombia and marked them up like 1,000% and ran black markets, causing all sorts of problems. Do you remember the pictures of people walking across the bridges with suitcases and with all these toilet paper and all this kind of stuff? They weren't fleeing the country. They were taking suitcases over there to buy their groceries so they had something to roll them back in, because all of these paramilitaries were raiding the stores. In fact, a lot of these goods never even saw the store shelves. The people that controlled the transportation, controlled the big grocery stores in Venezuela, were just basically selling the stuff straight to the paramilitaries. Where were we here? Further exacerbating the shortages. Eventually, the wealthy elitists who owned the grocery stores and trucking companies started selling directly to the paramilitaries, and the goods never saw the store shelves. Step 7. Now here's where the U.S. gets involved. This forced the Venezuelan government to step in, arresting thousands for this conspiracy, and that caused businesses to close, and all sorts of false allegations came out of the Venezuelan government, the illegal, terrible, horrible people, dictatorial. They're arresting people that don't agree with them. Total lie. They were arresting people that were tied to these criminal paramilitaries in Colombia for robbing the people. Step 8. By 2017, the U.S. had Colombian operatives in Venezuela attempting to destabilize the Maduro government, starting riots, fomenting civil disobedience. This is where a random guy named Juan steps in, by the way. Meanwhile, in Miami, fake dollar to Bolivar exchange rate websites began to pop up, driving the value of the Bolivar down relative to the dollar. I have 2 links proving this. One of these was just some guy in Alabama who works at a Home Depot put up this website. All of this hyperinflation number, all of this crap, was artificially engineered by the United States. It's illegal to do this. It's criminal to do this, but the U.S. isn't going to do anything about it because it's helping to foment the problem they're trying to create. Yeah, the people that were in from Colombia, by the way, they're called the Guarimbas. And they would go in, they would find pro-government folks, and they would burn them alive in the streets. These paramilitaries, primarily right-wing ones, the ones you never hear about, the AGC, the AUC, were the ones that you saw throwing the Molotov cocktails and creating all of this unrest in Venezuela. The U.S. hoped by 2017 to have this all taken care of. But due to a lot of people standing up like Abby Martin and other folks reporting this, they haven't been able to, play the game like they have been able to in the past. Step 9, 2018. The Bank of England refuses to repatriate billions in Venezuelan gold. Venezuela now forced to turn to China and Russia for refinancing options. The U.S. spin machine uses this to make the allegation that Venezuela now harbors and deals with U.S. enemies. There were 2 bombers from Russia that landed, Tu-160s, in Venezuela. They were escorted into Venezuelan airspace by F-16s. Do you know why the Venezuelans fly F-16s? Because they were our ally. They haven't always been our enemy. Their first choice always was to have good relations with the United States. But they weren't going to allow our big oil companies to come down there and turn it into a plantation, which they got away with doing for quite a few years. And eventually, you see, our president talks about all these bad deals that he's trying to change, that he's trying to put us on a level playing field with China and fix all this. This is exactly what Chavez did. He went in and said, no, these deals, we're getting screwed. We're going to fix this, and we're going to use the Constitution to do it. We're just demonizing Chavez for doing the exact same thing our leader has been doing for the last 2 years. In his speech last night, he made all of these allegations about how great the economy is because he redid all of these deals. Why is it okay for him, but not okay for Chavez? Step 10, 2019. The U.S. government and its allies refused to acknowledge results of a legal, free, and fair election acknowledged by most of the world, creating their own illegal shadow government using the MSM to sway public opinion and tie all suffering created by the U.S. to Nicolas Maduro. And once again, here is a link, and you will have all of this information, and you can find it for yourself. Now, I would like to show you a graphic. This is the entire world outlined based on who recognizes random guy named Juan the Warimba and who recognizes the legal, constitutional, duly elected government in Venezuela of Nicolas Maduro. The ones in red recognize Nicolas Maduro. By population, it's not even close. By amount of countries, it's not even close. And there's some folks in Europe that are picking up on this. Norway's one of them. Ireland's another. Italy, Greece. All of Africa, other than Morocco. All of Asia, India, China, Russia. Understand the game the U.S. government is trying to play. And I'll also give you this link from Venezuela Analysis, and you can check this for yourself. There's only one place, Europe, that has more people recognizing random guy named Juan than Nicolas Maduro. But in the Americas, we're still losing as far as the U.S. goes. 17 recognize random guy named Juan. 19 recognize Nicolas Maduro. The only country in the Middle East, Israel. This is what's going on. There's a tactic, a technique in psychological operations, which I've tried to illuminate to folks over at Patreon, but we're doing it here now at YouTube. And it's where you have two things that happen at the same time, and you try to tie them together as if one caused the other. For example, in 2014, when Nicolas Maduro took power, 2013 actually, when Nicolas Maduro took power, and then all of this crap hit the fan. They're trying to make the allegation with this chart that those two things, that one caused the other, when there were a whole lot of other things going on in the world that led to this. And that's why I've tried to encourage folks to sign up for the training. It's only $5 a month. And I'm going to be dropping videos at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, over at the Communities tab, where you can see this training. And you can look at it for yourself. It's why I have said our country needs to govern itself as independent nations, 50 independent nations, so that we don't always have the knee-jerk reaction of looking to Washington, D.C., or looking to Fox News or CNN or some other mainstream outlet to try to tell us what the truth is. So we can make up our minds for ourselves. We can do this. I believe in the American people. I don't believe in Washington, D.C. I don't correlate those two things. We are an amazing group of people. Speaking of the people of the United States, we have a great deal of diversity, and we don't agree on everything. But like they say, good fences make good neighbors. These lines give us our distinction, give us our strength. People of Texas, if you want to ban abortion, go right ahead. People of California, if you don't, great. Find whatever common ground, California and Texas, that you have, and work together on that. And let your differences be your differences. And I apply that to every state in the Union. There was a time in the world where the sun never set on the British Empire, yet it's gone. Big, powerful empires can fall. It happened with Rome. And it didn't take this massive other force to come in and do it. It took a lot of people, a lot of smaller groups, standing up and saying enough. And that's what we need to do. The Romans, the Appian Way, they crucified Christians by the tens of thousands. It was said that all roads lead to Rome, yet they're gone. The people in South America and in Latin America are not our enemies. There are elements in their government and in ours that would like to make you think that. They love their children. They love their freedom. They want to have a happy, peaceful life just like we do. Do they speak a different language? Absolutely. A European language, ironically. This whole talk about illegal immigration, what about the original illegal immigrants that came here with the smallpox-laden blankets? Does anybody ever talk about that? How we ended up being here? And I find it ironic that people are like, oh, I'm not going to learn Spanish. That was just another European language at the time. It wasn't the native language here. And what of the native inhabitants? Do they not have a say? This land could be showing us the way to get out from underneath the tyranny that has been dominating this country for 70 years. Perhaps longer. We can fix this, but it's going to be something where we have to stand up and realize what the real problem is. And I'll leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.